It's day 11 of the month. You opened your budgeting app with real intention on the first, categories labeled, numbers typed in, maybe even a little proud of yourself for finally getting organized. Now, 11 days later, you're staring at a grocery run that blew past your food budget, a just this once DoorDash order you told yourself didn't count, and a running thought in the back of your head that says, I just don't have the discipline for this. I want you to sit with something for a second. That thought is wrong. Not wrong in a comforting, feel-good way. Wrong in a literal, measurable, this has been studied for decades. Your budget didn't fail because you lack willpower. It failed because it was built on a broken assumption about how the human brain actually works. Once you see the real mechanism underneath it, you won't look at a budget the same way again. Stick around, because by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly why the just try harder advice you've heard 100 times has been quietly sabotaging you, and what to build instead so the next attempt doesn't end the same way as the last 4. Let's start with the belief almost everyone carries into their first budget, that money management is a self-control problem. You overspent because you were weak in the moment. You skipped the workout because you gave in. You bought the shoes because you couldn't resist. This is the dominant cultural story about money, that good financial behavior is a personality trait some people have and others don't. It shows up in the language we use without noticing. I'm just not good with money. I have no self-control when it comes to shopping, as if these are fixed facts about a person, like eye color, rather than the predictable output of a flawed system. It feels true because in the moment of overspending, it really does feel like a personal failure. You stood in the checkout line, you knew the number, and you swiped anyway. That has to be a willpower breakdown, right? Except here's the problem. Willpower, as researchers have measured it again and again, is not a fixed trait you either have or don't. It behaves more like a battery that drains over the course of a day. Every decision you make, what to wear, what to eat, how to respond to that email, whether to hit snooze, whether to say yes to one more request at work, pulls from the same limited reserve. Psychologists call this decision fatigue, and it's one of the most replicated findings in behavioral science. Studies of everything from judges' parole decisions to shoppers' impulse purchases show the same pattern. The later in a sequence of decisions you are, the more likely you are to default to the easiest option, not the best one. By the time you're standing in a checkout line at 6 p.m. after a full day of decisions, your capacity to resist an impulse purchase is nowhere near what it was at 8 a.m., fresh and rested. So when your budget assumes you'll have the same iron discipline at hour 14 of your day that you had when you built the spreadsheet fresh and motivated on a Sunday morning, it's not asking you to be consistent. It's asking you to be superhuman on demand every day in every emotional state you might be in. And when you inevitably fall short, because everyone eventually does, the budget doesn't say, this design was flawed. It says, in effect, you failed. That framing is backwards, and it's the first thing we need to throw out. Let me walk you through someone I'll call Daniel, a composite of the pattern I've seen play out the same way for a lot of people. Daniel is 34, makes just under $72,000 a year working in project management, and has tried 4 different budgeting apps in the last 3 years. Each time, the pattern is almost identical. He sits down on the first of the month, builds out 12 or 13 categories, feels a genuine surge of motivation, and for about a week and a half, it works beautifully. He checks the app daily, he feels in control. Then something shifts. A coworker suggests lunch out on a Tuesday. A stressful day at work turns into a $40 impulse order that night. Neither of these feels like a big deal on its own. That's exactly the problem. By day 20, Daniel has stopped opening the app altogether, because every time he does, it just shows him how far off track he already is, which makes him feel worse, which makes him avoid it even more. This is its own trap. The tool that's supposed to create accountability starts creating shame instead. And shame is a terrible motivator for consistent behavior. By the end of the year, Daniel had spent, by his own rough count, somewhere around $3,000 more than his budget said he should have. Not in one dramatic blowout, but in dozens of small $40 and $50 decisions that each felt harmless on their own. Here's what matters. Daniel is not bad with money. He manages six-figure project budgets at work without issue. He shows real discipline in nearly every other area of his life. He trains for half marathons. He shows up early to meetings. He's the person on his team who double-checks everyone else's numbers. The problem was never Daniel's character. The problem was that his personal budget was designed as if willpower were an unlimited resource he could call on at any moment of any day. And that assumption was false from the start, for him and for almost everyone who's tried the same approach. This is where behavioral economics gives us something genuinely useful, because it's spent the last 50 years documenting exactly why this keeps happening to nearly everyone, regardless of income, education, or intelligence.
The first concept you need is present bias. Our brains are wired to weigh immediate rewards far more heavily than future ones. That $40 lunch out feels good right now. It's social, it's tangible, it resolves a craving in real time. The abstract benefit of sticking to my budget is invisible, distant, and frankly kind of boring by comparison. There's no dopamine hit for a number that stays where it's supposed to be. Present bias means that in the moment of decision, the scale is never fair, the instant reward is loud, the long-term goal is silent. Willpower is what you'd need to overcome that imbalance every time, dozens of times a day across every category in your budget. And nobody's reserve is built to carry that kind of load without eventually running dry. The second concept is friction, or the lack of it. Behavioral researchers have found that the ease or difficulty of taking an action predicts whether people take it, often more than their stated intentions do. If overspending takes 0 extra steps, you just tap your phone at checkout, one click, done. And staying within budget requires you to actively remember a number, do mental math, and consciously override an impulse. You've built a system where the easy path and the wrong path are the same. Of course the easy path wins most of the time. That's not a character flaw, that's just how behavior responds to friction. In study after study across unrelated areas of life, retirement savings enrollment, organ donation registration, how often people refill a prescription when it requires an extra phone call versus an automatic renewal. The third concept is decision density. A traditional budget with 15 or 20 categories asks you to make constant micro decisions all month long. Is this coffee run a dining out expense or miscellaneous? Am I under my limit this week? Should I move $10 from one category to cover another? Each of those tiny decisions draws on the same limited daily reserve we talked about with decision fatigue. You're not just fighting one big willpower battle at the moment of purchase, you're fighting dozens of small ones all month, every month, and they compound quietly until by day 20, there's nothing left to fight with. The fourth, and one that doesn't get talked about nearly enough, is mental accounting, the tendency to treat money differently depending on where it sits in your head, rather than treating every dollar as equally valuable. It's why a $40 impulse purchase paid for with a credit card feels less real, less costly than the same $40 pulled from a cash envelope. The money is identical, the psychological weight isn't. Traditional budgets that live inside a banking app, disconnected from any physical sense of the money leaving your hand, quietly exploit this gap. Every swipe feels smaller than it is, which makes the small decisions even easier to justify in the moment. So we've got 4 things stacked against you at once. Present bias pulls you toward the immediate reward. Low friction makes the wrong choice the easy choice. Decision density drains your reserves before you even reach the moment that matters. And mental accounting makes the true cost feel smaller than it is. Traditional budgeting fails so predictably for so many people because of all 4 working together. It's not a Daniel problem, it's a design problem. And the design has been the same broken template for decades. Track everything, categorize everything, rely on remembering and resisting in the moment over and over for 30 days straight.
So here's the reframe, and it's the single most important shift in this video. A budget that works does not ask for more discipline. It removes the need for discipline in the first place. Behavioral economics call this choice architecture or environment design. Instead of trying to out-willpower your own brain, you change the environment so the easy path and the right path become the same path, and the number of moments where willpower is even required shrinks down to almost nothing. What does that look like in practice? A few concrete shifts. First, Automate the decision before it ever becomes a decision. If saving requires you to manually transfer money every month, you're relying on willpower in a moment when your reserve might already be gone. But if that transfer happens automatically on payday, before the money ever sits in your checking account long enough to feel spendable, there's no decision left to make and no willpower required to make it. This is the same principle behind why automatic retirement plan enrollment sharply increases participation compared to opt-in enrollment, even though the end choice available to the person is identical either way. Research on this is about as clear-cut as behavioral economics gets. Switching from opt-in to automatic enrollment more than doubled participation among newly hired employees in the original study on this, without changing a single economic feature of the plan itself. Remove the decision point, and you remove the failure point along with it. Second, add friction to the behaviors you want to reduce instead of just tracking them after the fact. If impulse online shopping is where your budget leaks, don't rely on noticing it in a spreadsheet 3 weeks later. Add a real, physical obstacle in the moment it matters. Delete the saved card information from your most used shopping apps. Add a 24-hour cart rule before any purchase over $50. You're not asking your willpower to win a fair fight anymore. You're tilting the fight in your favor before it starts, using the same friction principle that makes the wrong choice easy, except pointed in the other direction. Third, shrink the number of decisions instead of expanding your tracking. Instead of 15 granular categories that each require a judgment call throughout the month, consolidate into 2 or 3 broad buckets: fixed costs, flexible spending, and savings, and automate the boundaries between them. Fewer categories means fewer daily decisions, which means less decision fatigue burning through your reserve before the moments that actually matter. Fourth, make the money feel real again to counter mental accounting. For whatever category is leaking the most, dining out, online shopping, whatever it is for you, try paying for just that one category in physical cash for a month. It sounds almost too simple, but multiple behavioral studies have found that paying with cash triggers a stronger, more immediate sense of loss than paying with a card, simply because you can see the money leaving your hand. You're not adding willpower, you're restoring the psychological weight that swiping quietly removes.
Here's what all 4 of these shifts have in common. None of them says try harder. None of them says want it more. Each one changes the structure around the behavior, so the behavior becomes close to automatic. That's the philosophy shift, from relying on willpower in the moment to designing an environment where the moment barely requires a decision at all. Back to Daniel. When he eventually restructured his approach, not with more categories but with fewer, automated on payday with real friction added to his online shopping habit and cash used specifically for his dining out category, his spending gap didn't close because he suddenly developed superhuman discipline. Nothing about his willpower changed. What changed was that the system stopped requiring so much of it. He wasn't fighting present bias 15 times a day anymore. He'd already won most of those fights automatically before he was ever tempted, and the ones that remained felt smaller and more manageable because there were simply fewer of them. The personal finance industry has spent years selling budgeting apps, spreadsheets, and trackers that all share the same underlying assumption: that if you just have enough visibility into your spending and enough willpower once you see it, you'll change your behavior. But visibility isn't the bottleneck. Most people who fail at budgeting already know exactly where their money is going. Daniel knew. He could tell you his overspending categories from memory, down to the dollar, without opening a single app. Knowledge was never the missing piece. The environment was. This same present bias versus friction dynamic shows up well outside budgeting, too. It's why people struggle to consistently invest. It's why gym memberships go unused after the first few weeks of January. It's why "I'll start eating healthier" rarely survives past the first stressful week at work. In every case, the advice defaults to want it more, try harder. And in every case, that advice ignores decades of behavioral research showing that environment beats intention almost every time it's tested. So, if you've tried and failed at budgeting more than once, let go of the story that you're bad with money. That story isn't supported by the evidence.
What's actually true is that you've been using a tool designed around a flawed model of human behavior, one that assumes constant, renewable willpower is available on demand in every moment for every decision all month long. It isn't. Not for you, not for Daniel, not for anyone, no matter how disciplined they seem in every other part of their life. The shift that actually works isn't a better tracker or a stricter version of the same approach. It's redesigning the environment so good decisions require less from you, not more. Automate what you can, add friction to what you're trying to reduce, and shrink the number of moments where you're relying on discipline at all. Restore the felt weight of money where mental accounting has quietly erased it. When you do that, the behavior that used to feel like a constant uphill fight starts to feel almost automatic. Not because you became a different person, but because you stopped asking the wrong part of your brain to do a job it was never built to do. If there's one thing to take from this, the next time a budget falls apart, don't ask what's wrong with me. Ask what's wrong with the design. That single question changes everything about how you build the next one.